I have a radio face, not a podcast. Hey, welcome back to Vet Connect. Today, I got Lucas Hamrick here with me, and our special guest today is Mr. Matt Butler. Matt grew up in rural Utah and joined the Army in 1990. Graduated in '93 with a BS in history and minor in military science. Was commissioned in the Utah National Guard. Later on, Matt would volunteer for Special Forces training and transfer to active duty. Matt was assigned to the tribe, the Third Special Forces Group, and was serving in Special Forces during the events of 9/11. Over the course of the next 16 years, Matt would deploy 6 times to both Iraq and Afghanistan for a total of 42 months in combat. Matt is an advocate for plant medicine and alternative healing. He also earned an MS in human resources. He is currently married to his wife, Sue, and the father of 3 daughters. What a challenge. And grandfather of 2 grandsons that lives in the great state of Utah. Matt, welcome aboard today. I am excited for this conversation. I think there's lots of people out in the community that are interested in kind of what you do and alternative treatments, potentially to PTSD. So, welcome aboard, brother. It's great to see you.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and it's great to talk about these topics. I think there's a lot of work that we have to do to unwire some of the thinking around it.
Let's get started, man. Let's just dig right into it. Tell us what your business is, how you got established, and kind of what your goals are for that thing.
Okay, so first of all, it's technically not really business. It's more of a church, and we'll dive into that as we go. I'm sure the goals really are to provide as much transformative healing opportunities, primarily to veterans, but men as well. I'll only work with men, and we can get into that later. But I want to try to help as many of our brothers as possible. When I found this solution, this alternative solution to healing, it sort of it did two things. One, it lit a fire under my ass, and number two, it sort of pissed me off because I realized just how much I'd been lied to in my 50 years of life about this stuff. And so it really just it motivated me to try to get the word out there and make as much opportunity as I can for people to avail themselves of this. Was that all the questions?
Yeah, and so you mentioned that you're organized as a church, and I understand there's probably some legal implications, et cetera, for a business like this. Tell us what we don't know about kind of that business side of town, legal, illegal, whatever the case might be.
So and I wish that I could paint a black and white picture for you, even though in some respects it is kind of black and white because it's already gone to the Supreme Court. Um, you still have Johnny Law who, might get a little squirrely and decide that, the Supreme Court's ruling isn't good enough. So essentially, I think it was late 70s, early 80s, there was a Native American up in Oregon who was given a urinalysis. In fact, I think he was an employee of the state of Oregon, was given a urinalysis and came up hot for peyote. And he eventually sued them all the way to the Supreme Court to say, hey, as a Native American, this is my sacrament, and you cannot dictate that to me. And so he won. And then ultimately, following that Supreme Court decision, the Congress passed a law known as the Religious Freedoms Act, RFA, and it essentially says two things. One, the government has no place in determining another human being's religion, and no place in telling what that religion, what their sacraments can and cannot be. So there are plenty of churches here in the States. And when I say plenty, I mean, that's a relative number as compared to, zero.
Right.
It's not like there's thousands, but there's enough. They're out there. Some of them are very vocal. Some of them are advertising on Facebook, honestly. Um, I don't do that. I still remain somewhat, underground, obviously not by doing podcasts with my face name, but but there's that. But you know, there's still some gray area where even though this has been settled, that's the case. So yeah, we formed a church that allows us to designate our sacraments, and the three sacraments that I designate. Well, and that's another thing too. Like you can designate your sacraments in your own internal documents, but the moment that you broadcast that to the IRS, they want you to register them with the DEA, and that's where it gets sticky. And then so essentially, it's just a church. We're just a church, and we use plants as sacraments.
Well, to tell you the truth, control of plants doesn't seem like it should be a government function, but there's several people out there, that think plants are bad, you know. And I think I don't know what you think, but I think my take on that is a lot of lack of good information out there. So, talk to us a little bit about the different types of mushrooms that you use or see, or what is their benefit for, let's just say, PTSD.
Okay, so I'm going to actually start. I'm going to back that up a little bit if I can, and just
Okay,
kind of
sure.
give you a larger overview. In the world of psychedelics, there's basically three categories. There's plant medicine, there's actually reptilian medicine, and then there's synthetics. So within the synthetics category, we have things like LSD, MDMA, which MDMA is the pharmaceutical version. Sometimes it has things added like caffeine, and others, which is ecstasy and Molly. But ketamine, LSD, and MDMA, those are your synthetics. When you move over the reptilian medicine, you have Cambo, which is I think you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 and something peptides that cause a massive purge of your system, like it detoxifies you. There's another one called Bufo, which is the river, the Colorado River toad, and it produces a form of DMT, and I'll talk about DMT in just a moment, but it produces a form of DMT called 5-MeO DMT, which can be smoked. And then you have your plants, and underneath your plants you have, I mean, cannabis, psilocybin, which magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, acacia, um, iboga, peyote, peyote contains mescaline, which is also found in wachuma. So, broadly speaking, it's the psychedelic family of medicines that really all of them can kind of. The way I like to look at it is it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of medicine. One of them's going to do one thing for you, another one's going to do this for you, and etc. So it's not like they all do the same thing. I mean, we're not going to cut a twig with the screwdriver blade, for example, right? So you just kind of, each one of them have their place, and each of them do slightly different things. There's also some overlap too. So then, with respect to your question, within the mycology, within the mushroom family, there's psychedelic mushrooms and non-psychedelic mushrooms. Within the psychedelic mushrooms, I think there's something close to 150 strains of mushrooms that are all psychedelic. In fact, I think it's recently I've noticed two different discoveries of new psychedelics that hadn't been classified yet, that are coming on board too. So we're still learning in that respect. Um, but mushrooms and DMT. DMT is found in acacia and ayahuasca, and DMT is kind of considered the God molecule or the spirit molecule, and there's many different forms of DMT molecules, but that's kind of like the OG. Um, Below it somewhere is, and there's some overlap, a lot of overlap in these two medicines, is the psilocybin or the magic mushrooms, and those two molecules, those two molecules are just essentially super effective at treating trauma, namely PTSD.
So you mentioned DMT. Please forgive my ignorance. What does DMT stand for?
Dimethyltryptamine. Yeah, sorry, I should know better than to use acronyms. Yeah, dimethyltryptamine. The funny thing is like it's considered illegal in the country as well. But here's a fun fact for you. You have a pineal gland up here in the center of your head, like right
Mhm.
between your eye. Yeah, So, um, and there's two times in life at a minimum where a human being secretes DMT into their body. You produce it on your all by yourself. It's in your body. You release it at a minimum twice, when you're born and when you die, scientifically backed. And yet, if I go and get that DMT from a plant or an animal, reptilian, it's illegal. So it's again the absurdity of these laws cannot be quantified.
Well, I think the laws are kind of made by the special interest groups who want to control other things about your behavior. And again, not I'm not hell, I am a conspiracy theorist at this point in my life. I'll just say it out loud, man. But
Yeah,
but but to tell
Maui.
you the truth, it doesn't benefit big pharma who's pushing. Again, if you go to a clinic and you have any kind of mental issues, they tend to load you up with a lot of pills, man. And I think once you get more than one in your body, there's just no way to understand what that does.
When
You know,
commerce and government collide,
Mhm.
that's a challenge for the individual users who are seeking alternatives to pharmaceuticals. You know, that's a challenge.
Absolutely, and you're right. Like it starts off, and it starts off with the doctor saying, "Yeah, here's your antidepressant, here's your SSRI," and then like that does any number of things to us, right? And first of all, it's just a chemical lobotomy, right? Like yeah, guess what? I'm taking my antidepressants and I don't feel depressed anymore, but I don't feel any joy, happiness,
I
peace.
also feel nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I have now have ideation, which I didn't have to deal with before you gave me these pills. So
exactly. So
it's
then then
crazy.
maybe it keeps us up at night. So then they put you on something that's a sleep med, but then the sleep med affects maybe your metabolism. So then you got to get something for your weight gain, and it turns into this domino effect, really, like where before. I don't know if your experience was like mine, but you know when I got into this, it wasn't for lack of trying. I was doing everything the VA said, and I had like almost like a shoebox full of pills that I was trying to manage taking. This one twice a day, this one at night, this one up morning, this one 3 times a day, whatever, man. And it was like it's insanity how much we were going down this rabbit hole of pharmaceuticals. And really, the problem is they're not even treating the root cause. Like there
Right.
isn't anything in there that says, okay, well, let's address the trauma because the trauma is what's actually producing all these symptoms. No, they're masking the symptoms, and before you know it, you're just, you're
A
10 pills
victim.
deep.
Yeah, you're a victim of the matrix. And I think that roller coaster, again, every human responds differently to treatment with the medication. When you read the package insert on some of these things, as a former medic, I'm a package insert reader, as boring as that might be, but I want to understand, the mechanism of action. I want to understand, the contraindications, et cetera, when I put things into my body that I don't necessarily know about, right? And so I think that starts early on in your medical career, where they indoctrinate you with if this then that kind of mentality. The drug of choice for traveler's diarrhea is trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, or at least it was many years ago. Trimethoprim is an anti-cancer agent, and I'm using it to treat traveler's diarrhea when I could have done the same thing with eating clean food, drinking clean water, and staying away from the buffet over in the African hotel. I'm
Yeah.
just saying. And so, I think the ability for that community and pioneers like you to open people's eyes that there is something else out there. It's a long road, man,
It
but
is.
I think it's a fight worth fighting, especially with as many people are afflicted. We were reading this morning, and the VA spends about 242 billion a year on PTSD treatment.
Yep.
You have to ask yourself how much of that is the drug roller coaster that you just talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the funny thing is they want to throw around that 22 a day statistic. all the time. And again, like you said, $200 billion a year. So times that by 23 years. Um, and really, honestly, probably about $50 worth of mushrooms per person would have done the job, right? Like, it's insane. How much money, time, and effort. And the funny thing is like if we use that 22 as the barometer, if anything, it's gone up, right? Like we were wasting so much time and money and tax dollars chasing a solution when the solution has been right in front of us this whole time. And you're right. Like I need to, I'm no different than anybody else. It's not like, you know, it wasn't like I grew up doing drugs and I'm quote unquote drugs. Let's talk about that. But no, I had, I mean, I grew up in a, you mentioned I'm here in the great state of Utah. So I grew up Mormon. I think I may have smoked about half a dozen joints in my high school career, only if somebody would share one. I was too poor to buy any myself. and and then I went right into the army. So where was I never had I wasn't going to experiment in that. I didn't want to get popped on a urinalysis test and lose my retirement. So I went straight to the deep end when I got out, and had my I guess the need to go and do this, which we can come back to that. But when I did, it was straight into the deep end. I went straight to ayahuasca and to dimethyltryptamine, to DMT. That was where it started for me.
And was that the turning point for kind of opening your eyes to other alternative forms of treatment?
Yeah, it was. In fact, I'll tell you that story real quick. It's not one I'm necessarily proud of, but I'm proud of the ending, I guess you could say. I mean, so yeah, as you said in the intro, I had 42 months in combat, and again, like I always like to caveat this and make this really, I want to shout this part from the rooftop, so to speak. I know that I was for the most of my career, I was a field grade officer for most of that war and most of my deployments, and so I know that I didn't see nearly the action that the NCOs did, and I tip my hat and I give them the respect they deserve for that. But still, I still was in Afghanistan, Iraq, plenty of my lifetime, and still had my own shit to deal with. But when I retired in 2017, I was a typical operator. I'm sure you guys can identify with this, but we're taught, especially pre 9/11. Like I feel like the force matured on a lot of levels. Like we advanced technologically, tactically, equipment, everything like that. And I think that we also advanced some of our thinking around mental illness in that space. But nonetheless, like our generation who had gone to selection, like pre 2000, like, we had this attitude that I describe as eating our young, right? Like if you displayed any sign of sustained weakness, like you might come into work and find your rucksack sitting outside the
In the
team
hall?
in the hall. Yeah. And
In
we
the
all knew
hall.
what that meant. Like nobody had to break that down. Like you knew if your rucksack was packed and outside the hall, like you better go find a home. So, that mentality, like sustained, like it was a sustained mentality. Like nobody wanted to go like raise their hand and say, hey, I think I need to go see, the psych when you're in. And then even so more so when I got out. So by the time I retired in 2017, I like to say that it was an iceberg, typical iceberg. On the surface, everything looked good. I had a big house. I had a couple sports cars, a motorcycle. I was pulling down my retirement, my disability, and making six figures. Um, so yeah, life looked good on the surface. What was really going on was I was going through my third divorce. I was super depressed, suicidal ideation. um, I was I was a straight up alcoholic. I was drinking about half to a full bottle of Jameson a night, just to get to sleep. And even when that stopped working, as a medic, you'll know that this was a pretty dumb idea. But I was mixing, my sleep meds with my alcohol because it stopped working. So yeah, I needed all that stuff to just kind of cope. And I do like to preface and say I never touched a woman, but I did have 12 restraining orders from my ex. She liked to end arguments by calling the cops on me, and so their natural reaction is like, oh, he's 6'1" and 225 pounds and a trained Green Beret. Let's just get him out of the house. And so that was what was really going on under the surface. Did you have a question?
No, I would love to tell you you're the only one.
Yeah.
It's just not the case.
No, it's not. In fact, it's pretty typical. But what the turning point for me was my dad. I went up to his house, and we got into an argument over something stupid. And then I went back 6 weeks later to try to mend the fence, and instead of mending the fence, the argument just picked up with more fury. And I dropped a few f-bombs in their home, and my dad didn't appreciate that. So he said, get your. I was leaving, like I'd been in therapy, so I knew, like, okay, like my hands are getting tight, my breath is getting up, and my heart rate's up. I need to leave, right? Like the psych had taught me, hey, like when you start feeling this, dude, like you're about to go off, so you need to leave. And so I was on my way out. My dad yelled, "Get your ass back here," which was to say, you owe your mother an apology for your language. But that wasn't communicated. All my reptilian brain heard was, oh, if I got fight and flight and you just took away flight, well, all I got is fight. And so I launched a warning shot over the bow, so to speak, and I punched a wall. And so my dad called the cops, and it turns out in Utah there's a law that says if there's destruction of property during a domestic disturbance, it's an automatic trip to jail. So off to jail I went. I sat in his driveway for 45 minutes while the cops talked to him, and I was like, they came out, and I'm like, I was so arrogant. I was just like, can I leave already? Like, you're wasting my Saturday, man. Like, I want to go, do some fun stuff or whatever. And he's like, no, I need you to step out and put your hands on the foot of the truck. Like, just like it was like a black, like I was like, oh shit, like my life is finished.
And
So that's what led to my research. Like, how does one treat PTSD? And ayahuasca kept coming up. Ayahuasca kept surfacing. And so, I ended up finding a retreat and going to a retreat center and doing ayahuasca. So I think there were two ayahuasca ceremonies and a psilocybin ceremony that in those 3 days.
okay, so basically that's a low point, right?
That was the low point.
Now that's a low point. And so you went and you did a little bit of treatment. Again, I think you do what every Green Brave military member does. If I'm not finding what I need here, I'm going to go explore anything else that helps me be a better human, right? And
Adapt and
so
survive and overcome. Yeah.
and so you said, piss on it. Let me go. Let me do some research. Let me jump into this thing heads on. Did you stop taking all the rest of the meds that you had at that point?
So first of all, it wasn't like I was researching psychedelics. Like, I started like way 200, 25,000 foot level. Like,
Right.
can this even be treated? Because if you Google, can you treat PTSD? The answer is no. Like, it'll even like the first search result will say, like WebMD, like the best we can do is offer you a way to cope with your symptoms.
Yeah.
So I really had to like get after it and really try to search, and it kept coming up with psychedelics and specifically ayahuasca. And so then, yes, to answer your question, because DMT is it's the big one. I mean, make no mistake about it. And for listeners who don't know and haven't experienced it, like, don't fool around with DMT on your own. You need somebody to guide this. It is a very powerful drug. Now, well, let me say it. I hate it when I like, that's my conditioning coming through. It's a very powerful medicine. It's a very powerful sacrament. But it's so powerful that you really shouldn't do it alone. You need somebody who understands what they're doing, because even though it's very safe, like the medicine, like ayahuasca, DMT itself is not responsible for any deaths. Now, there have been people who have died in ceremony, but that's really from complications, like maybe they lied about being on painkillers or narcotics. There are people who get what's called permanent serotonin syndrome. Serotonin syndrome is where your brain just stops producing serotonin for the rest of your life. And that's because if you're taking an SSRI, I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but for the audience, SSRIs, what they do is they trick your mind into thinking that the serotonin that you're currently producing is adequate, even though it's not. And so then you come along and do DMT, and it produces like if you're normally only producing like 1/10 of what you need, you do DMT, and all of a sudden you're producing the 100% that you need. And then what happens is you're on these SRIs that tell your body that you've had enough. So your serotonin system short circuits. So yeah, you have to be careful with DMT. And so the place that I went had an intake form, asked all the right questions. Are you on any meds? What meds are you on? And as soon as and we do an intake call with I did an intake call with her. She's like, okay, you're off of this, you're off of this, you're off of this. And she gave me some recommendations on ways that I could manage my depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation in the meantime to before I got to ceremony. But you also follow a 2-week diet, and I feel like there's some controversy. Some people in the ayahuasca community don't feel like you need to follow the diet, and others do. It's more traditional if you go to somebody in South America to follow one. I personally believe in it, but I also ended up following a 2-week diet leading up to that ceremony. So yes.
So really, it's a body cleanse as a lead up to it, so to speak.
Yeah, to me, there's 3 reasons for the diet. One is a body cleanse so that the medicine has fewer things to fight against that are in your body. Number two, and I know that we're going to talk about some things here that are metaphysical, so they may sound a little bit, woo-hooey in nature, but I do believe in it. So, for example, the medicine is a metaphysical entity. She's a being. She's almost like angelic. It's not pharmaceutical at all. It has a soul. It's sentient. And so my belief is that the medicine is watching you and measuring your commitment to the process. So it's ROI, whatever the amount that you invest is the amount that will be returned to you. So there's that. And then the third part is the last 36 hours was like a juice cleanse and then electrolytes only. And that's because frequently in ayahuasca, DMT space, you'll purge, and a purge can be many things. A purge can be shaking, shuddering, laughing, crying, yawning, singing, dancing, screaming, vomiting and defecating at the same time. So the vomiting part and the defecating part, that is the purge. First of all, the purge is getting negative energy out of your body. Like the plant medicine knows where to go in. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score by I think he's Dutch or Danish doctor, and he describes how scientifically once we take trauma in our bodies, we store it until we find a way to release it. And ancient civilizations and even emerging world countries today, civilizations, they still have those methods for releasing that trauma. We don't, though. We sort of lost that in our contemporary Western world. So but the medicine knows where it is, and so when you purge, you're releasing that negative energy, but it can often be vomiting. And if that's the case, it's better to be vomiting just some electrolytes, some fluids versus, a breakfast burrito.
Tends to get caught sometimes.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, and I think we in the Western world, in the scientific community, I think there's a bias, obviously, toward traditionalized medicine. Otherwise, if they looked a little closer at the whole human approach to things instead of really just treating symptoms, like I think so many do,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a function of the profit. Medicine is a business, and we all know that that's true. When the doctor says you can tell me about 2 things, I have 20 minutes to see you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's not healthcare.
No,
because to me that's not
that's a
healthcare.
business. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's a business, and that is what it is. But for so many of us, I think we start to look beyond the horizon, especially when we're not quite as constrained with the things that we can and can't do. Retire, post retirement, etc. So
Mhm.
it's fascinating to me that it starts, kind of here, and this is why we're having this conversation, because I think there's probably people out there listening who, like you, may have gotten to the bottom, and they have, no other way to go or nothing else to, uh, other than the tribe, right? And
Right.
when you start talking about those factors of resiliency, friends, finances, family, fitness, those things start to deteriorate. And I think, like you, I retired in 17, and when you leave the tribe, that being your military family for us, I moved out here to San Antonio, Texas, away from the flagpole where I spent most of my natural life. I still had the tribe here. Lucas and I worked together in 19th group, but once that was gone, man, it's isolating.
It
You
is.
miss that tribe and that support mechanism, etc. We all go through. I think by and large, we go through the same types of things that you went through: the roller coasters, the ups, the downs, the let me go get therapy because I don't know what else to do. That's a hard one, right? Type A's are like, I don't need any help, and you are conditioned that way.
New lot in life when you can be bored. You know, you have to. Yeah, being bored is not something we're used to because we would find things to keep gainful employment throughout the workday or whatever. So as soon as you get bored, starting to like prioritize what you do with your time, all that research that you were doing to me is super insightful. Taking the opportunity to use that downtime to figure out how to solve your problems. That's something that most people don't really take into account these days. Everybody's looking for the solution to be handed to them. Taking the opportunity to ROI, same thing. The return on your investment in that time is your wellness being given back to you through exploratory research. I think that's great, man. I'm super enthusiastic about it. I was the same way. Kind of had some challenges. I was drinking like a fish. Same thing. As my transition. Luckily, I got to watch Sean retire 2 years ahead of me. So I got the Cliff Notes version on how to do things smoothly, which helped out immensely. But you're out there on an island and you don't really know how to make your priorities what they need to be, and wellness overwhelmingly needs to be at the top of that list, and it's not for a lot of people.
No, you're right. I mean, our version of wellness was always just just being physically hard, right? There's like there was no limit of like physical pain and suffering that you could throw at us that didn't, like, it was just we called it Wednesday or whatever. It was just normal. I mean, I've seen guys throw duct tape on their, probably they were probably nursing a hairline fracture, but they weren't going to miss out on a 5 mile run because they didn't want their shit in the hall, like packed up and set in the hall. So yeah, and I think you bring up a really great point, Sean, about like, like, here's the let me back it up and say it this way. First of all, if you're a human, you have trauma, period. Like, we need to stop stigmatizing mental illness. Like, we don't stigmatize physical illness, so why do we somehow stigmatize mental illness?
Because it's
It's
intangible.
normal,
It's
right?
intangible.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why.
good point. It's intangible, and yeah, it's I think it's also really hard to diagnose, to be honest with you, because they so many different versions of it manifest symptomatically in the same ways. But I think that we need to get to a place where we just kind of accept it as normal because it's part of the human experience. But I think that even retirement in some ways is very traumatic. I mean, I did a total of 27 years, and this word has a negative connotation. I don't necessarily mean it negatively. I just mean it from a place of like it's a good metaphor or a good explanation. But like, just like prisoners, man, we were institutionalized.
Of
Like,
course.
I mean, we were told where to go, where to be, what to dress, what to do, what to eat. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then all of a sudden, you end with a retirement ceremony, an award, and your wife gets a bouquet of flowers, and you're out the door on Friday, and Monday morning you wake up going like, like what the hell, man? Like I don't know what to do I don't know what to do. And so that's traumatic. And like you say, losing the tribe and losing the community, and even like losing your identity in a way, right? Like that became our identity the whole time we were in, and all of a sudden now I'm just like Matt in a t-shirt going to the grocery store. Like that's traumatic too. So that adds to the problem.
Well, it's the who. For me, it was the who and what conversation with myself in the mirror, right?
Mhm.
And this happened, I don't know, probably 6 months after I retired because I did the same things, right? Because that's my comfort zone. I get up in the morning at 5:30, whatever, go sweat a little bit, have some coffee, eat some breakfast, find something to engage for a while, whatever the case might be, job hunt, all those things that you do when you first get out. But just one morning, I had that conversation with the guy in the mirror, and I realized then that a Green Beret might have been what I was, but it's not who. For the longest time, I confused those two things because if it's who you are and that's all you're ever going to be, then you're going to be the dude on the Facebook group talking about how hard it was when I was young, or and I just don't want to be that guy, man. Nothing against the brothers at all, but I got to tell you, that was a stark realization. I had one more realization on the PTSD side of town. My oldest daughter is majoring in psychology in college, and we were sitting around having a conversation. She was talking about writing a paper on PTSD, and I said, "Well, what do you think about me?" And she goes, "Oh, you're classic. You're classic." I mean, what do you mean? She's like, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, "I'm not that way." She goes, "Yeah, you are." And any of the therapy that I've had or whatever the case is, when somebody, when your child stares you in the face and goes, "That's you, dude," kind of brings it home for you. But
It
The
does.
messed up, the messed up part is that's like the endearing qualities you look for in that young E6 who's coming to the organization. You want somebody who's hyper vigilant. You can put on a task and they will run that thing to ground. So it's weird that you have to kind of get on the other side of the coin. Uh, during your recovery process.
yeah,
So let me float something out here, because this
okay.
is kind of like a working, I guess, a working theory. This is a hypothesis of mine, but I've said this to a couple people. Most people sort of react shocked when I say it. Um, there's two things about PTSD that I don't think that people are telling us, or even are aware of. And I mean, when I say people, I mean like the doctors, the psychs. I'm in a PTSD working group with two of them. And I mentioned this, and they looked stunned. But PTSD, not only is it, and again, I mean, I might upset somebody by saying this, but there's people out there who only call it PTS because, again, they don't want the stigma of a disorder attached to them. I'm like, did that suddenly change your symptoms, dude? Or like, are you still wrestling with it? Like, but anyway, so let's call it what it is. It's a disorder, but I think that we look at it, from a symptoms place of like, like the hypervigilance and the sensitivity, alcohol abuse,
Mhm.
all this stuff, right? How about this though? Have you ever thought of it as an addiction and as a virus? And what I mean by that, right? Like we go in, we do this dangerous shit, whether it's, even in training or in combat, whatever, and then you survive. And well, we're all like, we're all taught, like it's ingrained in your head, whether if you're anything, probably in the mostly in the military, but especially in the combat arms, and especially within the soft community, that the answer to all of those problems is violence of action,
Yep.
right? 100%, like that you solve this problem with violence of action. So now again, put yourself back into my shoes. Like me and my dad are in an argument, and I have all the same symptoms going on physiologically in my body, right? Like rapid heart rate, shortness of breath, sweaty palms, like you can feel the pressure building up. It doesn't matter if I'm in a firefight, doesn't matter if I'm in a road rage system, doesn't matter if I'm sitting in my parents' home. Like the like from a speaking from a former alcoholic's perspective, I understand the addiction cycle, right? Like if I have a drink every night once the kids are in bed and tucked in, like if the kids go to sleep at 8:30, by 8 o'clock I'm starting to salivate because my body physiologically recognized that I'm going through my addiction routine, right?
Hmm.
So is it any different then if we're like if we get into a firefight and we react with violence of action, we're rewarded with endorphins, serotonin, and
Dopamine.
and dopamine. Boom, we got the best drug cocktail that was ever invented. And now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, my the neurons in my brain are saying like, oh, violence of action equals equals drug
Hmm.
cocktail. So now I'm like, and that's the other thing too. We talk about like ancient civilizations. Like warriors used to go off to war, and before they could come back to the tribe, i.e., the women and children, they had to like process their trauma before they were let back in ancient civilizations, right?
Yep.
So not us. No, we get on a damn plane and take off out of Bagram, and we're on Wednesday, and we're at our children's softball games on Friday.
Right.
No processing, right? And then I'm still in that physiological addiction cycle where, okay, now, whether overstimulation, the wife's nagging because I've been gone too long, the kids are crying for McDonald's, and like physiologically, like it's like, oh, and then my brain says, oh, I
Violence
know.
of action's the answer.
Yeah. Yep. You give them a little bit of violence
That
and
is
you
a
get
very
dopamine.
interesting theory. Yeah.
Okay, so
Uh,
there's that. Now the virus piece. Let me just double tap that, right? So you do that. Now what are your kids like, right? Like now are they having the D? Are they having the disorder? Because now they're walking around on eggshells. Your wife's avoiding you. Everybody, like, oh, like daddy's truck pulls in the parking lot and everybody scatters and shuts their doors in their bedroom. Now they have PTSD because now their lives are being affected. That's really the definition, right? If it becomes involved, it in a becomes affecting your life, right, in a negative way. So now your kids are it's
they're,
contagious. So yeah, there's my
they're
rant.
they're infected with the same virus that you have indirectly. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think your theory is off at all. And I'm no psychologist here, but having experienced that, and other militaries of the world actually warm people down, right? You get a smack on the ass, a chaplain's brief, and like you said, 14, 16 hours later, you're standing at the kid's soccer game, still in full sympathetic tone
Hmm.
from, not dialing out the combat chassis. That's what I used to call it. Get a dial in the combat chassis. When you walk to the C-17 at Green Ramp, you dial into combat chassis. The thing
Yep.
is, we always have a support group. We leave our family, our true family support group, and we go right into 11 other people, at least in theory, who feel exactly like you do.
Yep.
And so, it's a little quiet in the airplane, and then the bullshit starts, right? Because
Yep.
that's the comfort zone.
Yep.
And really, you don't miss a beat. And people, but Mama, she's got to go home. You know,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
she doesn't a lot of times have that support group. It's the same in reverse when you come back. So I think it's a very interesting theory, and the infection that you bring back, that virus from that increased sympathetic tone and that really Pavlovian, um, cycle that you described with violence of action, being the answer to everything. I think if I'm honest with myself and I look at my kids, I'm like, yeah, thank
Yeah.
God my wife is as level headed as they come and just doesn't really subscribe to that shit. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's not to say it hasn't infected her over the years, and 27 of them with me. My God, God bless her. I think she's an angel. But uh,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, I think it's really that's such an important point. How do you detune? Well, we do what we do, right? Oh, hey man, I got to face out and drink water, but not now because I'm on a team.
Right.
If I do that, I'll be ostracized. That stigma still exists, Matt. I think we'll never get away from that stigma with high performers. I think it is a little more acceptable now to ask for help. At least that's what the headlines read. Uh,
Well, go ahead.
I think if you go into the team room and ask people and say, "Hey, man, this is off the record. Are you good?" You get a lot more like, "Man, I'm not really good." Right?
One of my assignments was with JSOC. Let me see, probably 10 to 13 ish. Yeah, 10 to 13. And at the time, I had some good commanders. I worked for McChrystal and Votel, and their senior enlisted leader at the time was Command Sergeant Major Thetford. and he went down to SOCOM. He was the senior enlisted advisor at SOCOM before I think ultimately retiring. And like that dude impressed me. I mean, I've probably spoken to him and shaken his hand half a dozen times or whatever, but not like we're friends or anything. But I just want to say, like, I remember the effort that man put into destigmatizing this. Like, we did an all hands call in JSOC, and it went out to the tier 1 units as well, with that man saying, look, I'm going to stand here before you and tell you all that I am not well and I need help and I'm seeing a psych and I invite you to do the same, was essentially the message of his his all hands brief. And like that really, like, I was, we're talking 10-13, like when I was actually diagnosed was 2011. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't ask for any help. I just, I went and saw a doc once because my alcoholism was getting out of control. But in any case, yeah, he did a lot for the community by doing that. And I wish that more senior enlisted, more general officers were doing that, where they were coming up and saying, look, I'm not all right. And I suspect you're not either. And that's okay. And let's get through this,
That's one of those, seems like one of those questions you don't want the real answer to sometimes.
Yeah.
From and that's, back, and hopefully now, and I say things have slowed down. They've slowed down because I'm no longer part of that community. Internally, I'm sure it's still, full steam ahead. But, it seems that as some of the theaters have spun down, we're in that, 90s kind of era now again, where we, rest, refit, train, re-equip, rearm, do all that things. And I think, people's mental health have to be taken care of, and it's only through true leadership, like you provided an example for, that will happen. I mean, and honestly, I think, I don't know, within again, I'm far removed, so I can't comment on anything in the community currently, but it seems like the people you reach back to are fairly open nowadays. And willing to say, hey, I could use a little help over here.
Well, here's a funny thing, and I hope I'm not going to get anybody in trouble with this, but back in the 90s, I think that a lot of us were on performance enhancing drugs. I know I was taking steroids that we could find downrange. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the SEAL team guys and the other tier 1 units were on them as well. No proof of that, just, except for, seeing massive amounts of muscle packed on that didn't seem natural.
What are you talking about? Joe Weider protein powder, man.
Yeah, that's it. And some creatine. But there's a rumor in the community that I've heard more than one time that the performance enhancing drugs that they're taking now is mushrooms. Like it brings a clarity, it brings a focus, it brings, like microdosing it, not obviously not doing, 5 grams of mushrooms and jumping out at 15,000 feet ways, but like doing a 1/4 gram, a traditional microdose, which doesn't change your perception, doesn't change your impairment in any way. When like that just, well, here's the other thing too. Psilocybin creates neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. So think about all the TBIs. In fact, I'll give a big plug for this. Like, and if people need to get a hold of me, have them get a hold of me. But if not, if you have a way to get a hold of it, there's 4 things that will reverse your TBIs, gentlemen. If you take them together, it's zinc and magnesium, lion's mane mushrooms, which you can buy at the grocery store, but I mean get the dry one, take the capsules, and then psilocybin. Those 4 things together, it's like exponentially, like any one of them will improve your cognitive function, but when you take all 4 of them together, there's an exponential effect that will roll back the clock on your cognitive function and your TBIs, man.
So
lion's mane, I hadn't heard of that. I take a zinc supplement.
I am admittedly ignorant when it comes to this type of therapy. I've seen mushroom coffee advertised. What's mushroom coffee? Because I'm interested in that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that I know that. So I'm not a coffee drinker anymore. I was like you. I was a 1 pot a day guy. like I said, in the morning and Jameson at night. Um, and then like when I did my first retreat, all of this ended, man, even my coffee consumption. And so what I drink in the morning is actually I'm going a long way around the barn to answer your question, but I'll give you a plug for kombucha. You guys ever heard of kombucha?
Mhm.
I have heard
You
of it.
know, yeah, it's like all the girls with like hairy legs drink it, right? And me. I actually make my own. Kombucha it's a probiotic, and really the probiotics. It doesn't matter whether you're just taking a probiotic pill, kefir, yogurt to an extent, but the highest quantities of probiotics are found in sauerkraut or kombucha. And I drink kombucha in the morning because it's actually made from black tea, so there's still a little bit of caffeine bump in it, not a lot, so it's not a spike. But that's my morning thing. And the reason I want to plug kombucha for the community is because kombucha restores your gut brain binome. Now, we can talk about this whole PTSD and doing a ceremony and releasing your trauma. But frankly, if the mechanism is broken, i.e., we're not rewiring our brains and growing new brain cells, that's a problem. The second problem is what if your serotonin levels aren't producing, right? And that's where kombucha comes in. When you produce 95% of your serotonin in your belly with your gut binome, and then it's pumped to your brain. Okay, so just a little plug on my morning routine. But no, I have a lot of friends, especially veterans, who are drinking the mud, the mud, which is a mushroom coffee alternative. So it's not anything to do with psilocybin, but it has like reishi, turkey's tail, lion's mane, the which are really good mushrooms for your health. And in fact, turkey tail has anti-cancer properties. I think reishi does as well. They're all for your cognitive function, for clarity. I think there might be some ginseng and some other things in there that may help with that cognitive function as well. And so that's a really good one.
We had a question from the audience. What are the UIs for zinc and magnesium? What's the dose?
Um, I don't have my notes on me. I think if you follow the RDA on the bottle, you'll be fine. If I remember correctly, I think, yeah, it's like 250 milligrams, I think, for both of those.
That's
And then with the lion's mane, about the same. And then with the mush, they're all about 250 milligrams.
Yeah, 230 is what the
Yeah,
internet says on that. So
yeah.
that's probably pretty close to what the bottle was. I was trying to think of my zinc bottle, but it's on
I
the other
think
side of the house.
as you talk about the whole man approach to these things, and I say that including everyone obviously, but I think that the gut health has been talked about a lot. I know I follow Dr. Stephen Gundry and several others who talk gut health, a lot. And in our own community, Jeff Darty, I don't know if you know Jeff.
Love it, man.
Jeff is a big component of gut health. And when you think about leaking, the toxic crap that you ingest, I try to keep this pretty simple with my own health. I stay around the outside of the store. Down here in Texas, you're okay out there because that's where you get at least something that resembles whole food. When you get into the inner aisles, man, that's where you get in trouble. That's the ho ho aisle. That's the ding dong aisle. That is really just poison, man. But god dang, does it taste good?
Yeah.
Little Debbie's my friend.
And especially when you get that I don't know, that entitlement mentality. I mean, like, man, I skipped these my whole life. I don't have to do that anymore. Well, next thing you know, man, you're buying those T-shirts with that thing in the front. I'm like, bro, where'd that come from? And it's when you get a little older, as we are, it's the road back is long, man. And so I'm a big proponent of sticking good stuff into your into your gullet and trying to take care of your gut health. I think prebiotics and probiotics are a good thing. You got to have that balance of enzymes and probiotics. But I'm a kefir consumer on a daily basis. Um, not every product like that is made equally. I think some of the best probiotics that I've found are the ones in that refrigerated aisle in the brown bottle. If you're into the pill thing, but um, I never thought drinking, growing up as a kid on a farm, I'd be drinking spoiled milk on a daily basis.
We got a commercial coming up, so it's probably a good place to put a pin in that, and we can pick it back up on the other side of the commercial.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, when we come back, we're here with Matt Butler. We're talking about lots of things today, gut health on down the line to microdosing. So stay tuned. Jump back in with us after the break. We appreciate you being here today.
Mark and I have both been in the infantry in the Army. I had been in the Marines prior to that. We both ended up in a unit called 1st Special Forces Group.
I was a sniper in the infantry, been a sniper in Special Forces, and did a full career in different types of teams, mountain team, air ops team, counterterrorism team. I met Curtis actually at Fort Lewis when he was running a sniper locker, and then we were on a team together in Okinawa. We've been friends, and we've always talked about going into business and life after the Army.
We got out, went to work in the civilian world, and realized a lot of what we did in the military translated to business. We looked at the cutlery industry, and the people there as a culture were fantastic. And we said, hey, we're going to start a knife company here in North Carolina.
In the beginning, we had a knife grinder, a blaster, some rudimentary tools. We started out and decided, what do we want to make? Well, let's make something we know. So it was a combat knife, and we did 3 models because we figured you got to have more than one when you start out.
You know, you think you know everything about knife because you carried one all your life. But to be quite honest, we were new at it. We didn't know everything, so we took them to a lot of our Special Forces buddies at Fort Bragg. They gave us some advice and allowed us to develop those initial products. Today, we have a whole lot more offerings than we did in those early days. We actually have 3 distinct lines of knives we call gold, silver, and bronze. Gold being the knives we make right here in our shop in North Carolina. The silver line knives are those made for us by our partners up in Olean, New York at K-Bar. And our bronze line are knives we design using US-made steel that are manufactured overseas. A lot of folks think we have a giant manufacturing facility with 100 people. And quite honestly, we have 10 core people that we use to build our knives.
Making a knife isn't as simple as most people think. There are many processes that are involved, so we have checks and balances and continuous quality control throughout the processes. We know that perfection should not get in the way of getting your job done. So while we strive for perfection, we know we'll never achieve it.
I'll never forget the first time we won a Blade Show award because of the rest of the industry, the people who do what we do, saying, hey, you guys have this figured out. We realize that quality, it's not just the time we put into making the knives, it's not just the high-end materials or processes or even the money we spend, our raw cost to make those knives. In the end, the quality is proven out by the people that hold them and use them, right? If someone's willing to pay for it, and they're willing to carry it, and they're happy to carry it, they might even brag about it. To us, that's the measure of quality. We don't chase trends. We don't put things on knives that don't need to be there. We always joke, and I know this sounds ultra simplistic, sharp, pointy, with a comfortable handle. You do those 3 things, you're probably gonna be successful in knife making. And I think if you can take a look at a knife, it's very, very simple, but you can immediately say, I know who designed that, or I know who made it. To me, that's a measure of success. That's what we try to do here at Spartan Blades.
Both Curtis and I care about our country. We fought for it. We took our oath seriously and still do to this day. So since our product goes to end users who use it in the most ultimate fight, we take it seriously, what we make. That when it goes in a box and it gets sent to a customer, that it's ready to go wherever you need to go. And it's going to be there and perform. And that's what we strive for every day.
They currently not exist. I think we're coming back right now. So,
Yeah, I'm just coming out of that.
all right. Hey, we're back. Again, we're talking to Matt Butler here. Lots of things. Matt is a big proponent for some traditional plant therapies and the ability to think outside the box when we're talking about treatment of PTSD. So on the break, we were talking a little bit about our game and the ability to match, mental and physical data through subjective and objective matching via, a wearable in a game. And so what we're kind of exploring in conversation off camera here was really a potential treatment regimen whereby you would microdose and play this game. And so the ability, I think, to measure then what those incremental changes would be in kind of that academic environment from a research standpoint, I think is really interesting. What do you think about that?
I think that's terrific. I think that would be something I mean, really sounds very tantalizing to be involved in. Because when we the thing is when you take any one of the psychedelics, really what happens is you're able to access parts of your brain. Parts of your brain come alive in a way that you've probably most people have probably never even experienced before, and so in that space, that's where the healing takes place because we go into our subconscious, where what I like to say is where both the problem and the solution exist simultaneously. But in addition to that, like it's creating new neural pathways, it's giving you new ways to see things, and it's creating when you do a hero's dose, you create 30 days of neuroplasticity. So there'd be a lot of interesting ways to explore, maybe doing a hero's dose, then playing the game, or microdosing while playing the game. That would probably, I'd love to see the study on that, like with two different groups, right? Like one who's not and one that is, and seeing the differences in the analytics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of our biggest suppositions is that we think we can more accurately define what wellness looks like through data analysis as opposed to the DSM-5 series of tests that you'll take to kind of tell that story.
Yeah.
I've done prolonged exposure, EMDR, a couple different methods of counseling to try and fix some of my problems, and I always tell everybody we talk to. I think I went to about 6 extra months worth of therapies because I would schedule my appointments at the height of traffic time in San Antonio because that's when I had availability. So I'd get to the office disgruntled, have to take the PCL5, and all my scores would say, "Oh, things aren't going so great for you. Let's bring you back in and recock this." And then I'd go sit and talk with my therapist. He'd be like, "Well, nothing really seems out of sorts." But your scores aren't reflecting, so
Yeah.
the ability to accurately measure is something that we're very interested in. And we talked with Dr. John Drozd. He's an Air Force retiree. We were talking about him using some like neuroplasticity measuring devices that are on the market yet. We're a startup. We can't really get that far down the road, but that's also a very high point of interest is those additional sensors that can measure the things that we can't accurately capture while we're sitting on the couch in a passive manner. So we're really excited about all that stuff.
Yeah, I've always thought because I had my EMDR experiences. In fact, to my knowledge, there's only three things that actually cure PTSD in my research. One is plant medicine, psychedelics. Two is horseback riding. Actually, there's something about because you're moving when you're riding horses, you're moving on all three directions at the same time, right? You're moving forward, you're moving side to side, and you're moving up and down. And so there's something that causes it's the same with the EMDR, right? When you have the paddles, your both hemispheres are firing at the same time. And I think it's the same with the horseback riding. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to EMDR, I've always thought like my EMDR was pre plant medicine. And now having done plant medicine and understanding the neuroplasticity and the connectivity of the multiple hemispheres, it's like, oh, okay, I would love to go back and do EMDR on a couple grams of psilocybin.
Oh, yeah.
And to tell you the truth, the recording of that data is also important. How do you know if you're progressing or not progressing if you're not recording?
Benchmarking, yeah. That's all we're really trying to do is create a new definable benchmark for what each individual person's normal should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think the standardized tests. I mean, you're damned if you do or damned if you don't. Really, I mean, they need a bulk solution to a problem that affects everybody from the world's biggest fraternity. The military force is vast, and 10,000 people get out of the military every month. So it's just constantly churning that veteran population, getting bigger and bigger. Eventually, the GWAT folks are going to quit being a part of that discussion because there's not going to be anybody left.
Right.
And I think one comment that you made on off camera was nobody's coming for you. I say that all the time, dude. And you are your best health advocate. Nobody cares about your health like you do. I promise you that.
Yep.
And so it's I think we are, we're indoctrinated. Hey, somebody's coming for you. No man left behind. Somebody's coming. Somebody's coming. And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but I have to tell you, you have to do for yourself. Right.
Well, right. But somebody's coming for you on the tactical level, but I like to think of it this way. Like imagine, you're an ODA in the Ruzgan Valley, which was the nastiest place in Afghanistan. And, you're calling for reinforcements, but for whatever reason, the air support's out flying some general on a battlefield circulation. You're not going to get it, right? Like that's a reality, right? Like that shit happens. And so at a certain point, you look one another in the eye and say, well,
Just us.
buckle up. Let's get the shit done. We got to figure out a way. And you adapt, improvise, and overcome. And so I look at that as a perfect metaphor for what the hell is going on, with the suicides. Like, no, the uppity ups, the higher ups, they're out flying around doing battlefield circulation, pumping money into, whatever campaign and advertisement and pharmaceuticals. And you're like, dude, we are locked in the mother effing Ruzgan Valley here and surrounded on every side, and nobody's sending reinforcements. Well, let's buckle up and figure this shit out. And that's why to me it's veteran to veteran, talking about this stuff, spreading awareness, saying, hey, listen, take everything that Nancy Reagan and everybody told you in the DARE program and flush that shit, because it isn't serving you, man.
Yeah.
There's no problem in this world that a pack of Green Berets can't figure out.
Right.
I just believe that's true. I honestly do.
I agree with you.
And the thing about it is, man, for some reason, when we leave the military and we kind of leave that tribe, we actually leave that tribe. We all go our separate ways. And of course, we, stalk each other on LinkedIn. Hey, what's Sean doing now? Dude, we got to stop that, man.
Mhm.
We got to talk to each other. We got to energize networks. We got to pool resources, and we got to go after this thing if we want to win.
Well, here's an interesting thought for you. Okay. Let me ask you a question, and I'm just going to throw you under the bus live here, man. But
Let's do it.
if I were to text you or call you up, offline, not on this, but yeah, right now, man, and say, hey, man, if I'm in a dark place, will you pick up the phone for me? Would you listen? Right?
Every time.
Every time. And anybody in the tribe that you ask that of would say the same damn thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm going to flip the question. I'm going to say, okay, brother, when you're in a dark place, are you going to be man enough to pick up the phone and call me?
No.
I wasn't, but I am now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Lucas. I mean, and me too. Right? Like we go through, we it's easy for us to say, yeah, bro, you pick up the phone, you call me anytime, 24/7. I'll listen. I'll be there. I won't, I'm there for you, man. And then when you flip it and just say, okay, man, well, I need you to call me when you're in a dark place. Everybody's like, I don't know about that, right? And that's the problem, man. We got to get out of our own damn way and say, hey, it's okay to be a little bit broken. It's okay to have downtime and need to, like you said, take a knee and drink water. And that's all right, man. Like, because if we're isolating, like you're saying, then that's a dangerous place. That's where addiction and suicide and everything thrives, in this isolation. You have to have a community. You have to have people looking after you.
You have to be smart enough to know what wasn't working for you isn't going to continue to not work for you, and do something different. So you have to grow as an individual to know that I have to change my habits and ways and routines in order to become effectively functional in society again, and be smart enough to know that I need to reach out for help when I need it.
Right. And again, all like you said, like a 12-man ODA could solve any problem in the world.
Yeah.
And so we can solve this problem. And it's the same thing that they taught us, right? It's people, not hardware or pharmaceuticals, right?
Yeah.
It's that soft ethos. It's thinking outside of the box. It's solving the problem unconventionally, which, when you think about it, that is plant medicine, right? Like I've seen it, sadly, one of the biggest disappointments in this space for me has been, like, I'll jump on a few SF Facebook pages and try, other than the soft health that Jeff runs, I've been, there's receptivity there. But if you jump into like a hardcore, like the team room or something like that, and you try to share about this, you get shut down. And I'm just like, oh my God, dude, like, I thought you were a Green Beret. I thought you could think outside the box. I thought you were unconventional, and some of them don't want to hear it. And that, breaks my heart.
Well, honestly, that's the indoctrination, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
I mean, let's face it.
yeah, and I had to work through that, you know. Right.
And some people are okay with being not okay. Because that's how they identify as a person. It's not me. I'm just broken.
Yeah.
So overcoming those indoctrinated thoughts is also a challenge in its own right.
But
Very much so.
that's so hard for type A's though. I think you maintain excuse me. I think you maintain a portion of that type A throughout your entire lifetime. It is very hard, especially for high performers, to say, man, yeah, you know what I mean?
It isn't working. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lucas tells me all the time, man. Well, you're not changing anything about yourself. Why are you expecting a different result?
Well, and that was what was going on, like with me when I hit rock bottom when I was arrested, right? Like the two realizations I had in that jail cell were, one, all right, maybe I need to admit that my problem was a little bit bigger than what I'm saying it is. It talked about the part of the iceberg that was under the water. And then number two, maybe I need to find a different alternative because what I'm doing, it's the definition of insanity. I keep doing the same thing over and over and over, and look where it's got me. Like nowhere. Like nothing is making a dent in it. Like I was going to AA, I was going to therapy, I was going to group, I was taking antidepressants. I even had a support dog at one time, and it was like nothing made a dent in this. Nothing. And so I was like, okay, let's be honest with ourselves here. Is this really working? Is this paying off? If this were combat and you kept going, you kept getting blown up at the same intersection, like you might want to think about something differently,
Quit going through that intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or put some eyes on it at
Yeah,
least.
yeah,
Do something different for crying out loud, man.
Healthy habits and hobbies is like the antidote for me. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do anything anymore other than like try and maintain a healthy lifestyle. I've got a small farm, which really helps. Interacting with animals helps out quite a bit in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
But
have a
just
little dog.
maintaining those resilient type habits that know that I get to talk to Sean every day for work, and check-ins are different now because you are more candid in your approach. Hey, things are shitty today. It's probably going to be a shitty day for me. So, any help on this uplift would be greatly appreciated. That kind of stuff, and you start to be more authentic. I guess is the key
True.
Yep.
in that regard.
A lot of it's that journey of self discovery after the fact. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. 52 damn years old. You know,
Yeah.
and people sometimes say, and I hear this a lot, and I've asked the question to my own kids, what are you passionate about? Well, hell, I ain't passionate about anything except what I'm doing right now. You know what I mean? I'm passionate about saving people. I want another person. That number that gets thrown out, 22, it's more than that. We all
It
know
is.
it's more than that. A hell of a lot more than that.
Passionate about not having to interact with a text thread about one of my friends killing themselves again.
Yeah.
That I know I'm passionate about.
And that's just it. How do we come together as a community and say, look, we don't have, the answer, you know, on this one, but we got something, and we're gonna use that violence of action and pursue it till it doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere. I think that's it, right? It's the tenacity to stick to it and the ability to say, hey, look, we might not be the answer, but we are an answer.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, you're right. It's just taking a different approach. It's taking the same approach and applying it to a different set of circumstances. To get after saving us because we can't rely on the VA. We can't rely on traditional medicine. We can't rely on because none of it's worked. It's not that I'm angry or pissed off about it. It's just like no, there's no evidence. There's absolutely no empirical evidence that says that what's been given to us for the past 23 years is going to work. So let's look at something else. And that's the funny thing is like there are thousands of studies out there, empirical studies that show that this will work.
And the thing is, there is a mountain of empirical evidence to the contrary. That's the thing. We're ignoring that like it doesn't exist. but yet we're unwilling to walk outside the box a little bit and go, wow, this actually works.
Some people say that a psychedelic journey is worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 years of talk therapy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, man. It's good stuff. So yeah, you know, it
So,
became my passion trying to get this into the veterans' hands.
You ever think about doing any type of like grant support requests to start allocating some like funding towards getting those studies done? I know they're doing it at like right as I was retiring. I retired at the end of 19, walking around in the basement of BAMC over on Fort Sam to clear. You'd see the posters about all these studies that they were doing for DMT, ketamine, and things of that nature. Do you think anything like that would be in your future, or something you'd
No,
be interested in exploring?
I haven't thought about it. I might be interested in exploring it. I know that the VA is doing studies with, well, so let's go back to MDMA. Like all the ones that I listed right now are illegal, quote unquote
Yeah.
illegal. But unless you have like the religious freedoms exemption. But MDMA is actually on, I think it's done with phase 3 trials. So you should see MDMA hit hit, you should be able to get a prescription for MDMA pretty soon. And then I know that the VA is studying psilocybin as well uh, for potential use with PTSD. They just haven't. It's going to take them 10 years to finish it, but yeah, they're talking
Yeah.
about it.
Just
so,
long enough for all the GWAT people to not really be a problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
talk to me about ibogaine therapy. Are you familiar?
Ooh, yeah, I'm familiar with it. That's the one that I haven't experienced. It's there's like with some of the plant medicines, there are some ethical considerations. Like I mentioned, the Colorado river toad, or Colorado river toad. I think it's also the Sonoran desert toad, same name or different name, same thing. Anyway, that one, like I said, like it produces a toxin that you smoke, but there's some ethical problems because you got to go out there and round up these toads that are only above ground 3 months out of the year during the rainy season, and they're threatened because of encroachment. And then you got to catch them. You got to squeeze the pot. Like it has a little wart on it, a little pustule. You squeeze it, it squirts the toxin. You have to dry it, harvest it. So there's some ethics around that one. They have a synthetic 5-MeO DMT that you can get so that you can leave the frogs alone. So in that same respect, ibogaine, there's some worry about that. Like it only comes from I think it's Ghana. It's in West Africa. I know it's in West Africa. I'm pretty sure it's Ghana that it grows naturally, and because it's been commercialized, for the treatment of mental health, like even the native Ghanaians aren't using it because they'd rather sell it than take care of their own mental health with it. But nonetheless, here's the thing. Like, so again, coming back to I know that there's a lot of vets that go and do a boga, right? And it's having a lot of effect, a lot of positive effects. But in my book, and again, this is just kind of my opinions, so you all do your own research. But in my opinion, if you look at that Swiss Army knife, the two that are the primary best for getting after PTSD are DMT and psilocybin. Iboga is really, really good, and it's been used for PTSD. But it's what it does is it's really good for heroin addicts or anybody who's like meth, heroin, fentanyl, any of those really, really hardcore drugs. Because what it does is it basically resets the neural receptors in your brain that are calling for that addiction, that are craving it, right? And so when you do a boga, you essentially get like a 30 to 40-day pause or break in the craving that allows your brain to reset. And that's the only one that'll like quiet that and give you a pause, a timeout from your addiction, at least as effectively. The other thing with a boga that's a little bit like it's also another one, like when I was telling you ayahuasca, you got to be very careful because of the DMT and serotonin sickness. A boga is one of those ones that is a granddaddy of a journey. Like you may disassociate for about 22 hours, and so like you have to like really be screened well medically before you go into it, because you're going to have a hell of a journey, and so there's a little bit of risk with it as well. So I haven't tried it. I guess I'm waiting for maybe a synthetic version or something like that. Because yeah, but yeah, it's another good one that a lot of vets are using. There's a clinic in Tijuana, Mexico. I think it's vets that is sending. There's a nonprofit called Vets, which is
Hmm.
Veterans something treatments,
Right.
yeah, psychedelic treatments. And then I'm affiliated with the other. There's another veteran nonprofit called Heroic Hearts, and I was more involved with them a while ago than I am right now. But I was an ambassador for them for a little while. I think they're doing great work. Um, a little bit of my philosophical differences with them is they will only send people to South America for treatment. And like you're talking, and they do it on scholarship. So if you signed up, you'd be able to go. And I think it's about a year to an 18-month wait list from the time you sign up, because there's not enough money to send you down there immediately, right? And because you probably got to spend about 6 grand between travel and ceremony to get down there. Whereas there are people here working with the same molecule, DMT, uh, you know, for $1,000. So we can, do 6 times the work here in the States than we can do by going to South America, not to mention the political travel, the threat of another, lockdown, all of that, the cost. To me, it's a little bit problematic. I still appreciate them and applaud them and support them. I just have a small difference of opinion philosophically.
It the reason I asked about the Abigail therapy is a friend of mine actually went down to Tijuana and went to therapy. Um, and I won't go too deep into detail, but uh, I said, "Look, man," because he called, so call your medic and ask him about it. Kind of one of those deals, right? And I'm like, "Look, man, I don't know nothing about that at all,
Yeah.
but I would tell you." You make sure you're in a controlled environment, understand exactly what you're getting into, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I said, please call me, when you're done. Number one, so I know that you made it through and you're still alive, you know,
Yeah.
But number two, I'm interested. And he, after the fact, he called me and we talked for about 2 hours. And he said that was, a life altering experience for me. I was, quote unquote, down and under for almost 30 hours
Yeah.
because I relived every traumatic event, in my entire life, things I didn't even know existed in my subconscious that traumatized me when I was a kid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Found religion, found God. I mean, literally just push a reset button on his entire mental life, so to speak. And he's in a good place now.
Mhm.
And you have to ask yourself, man. I mean, number one, kudos to you for going on the journey. I think so many of us are. I'll speak for myself and say I'm scared to go on that journey, man. The demons are in the closet for now, but I
Yeah.
want to go in the closet. Maybe that's what I need to do.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, I think philosophically, you could argue that psychedelics are a great modality for just about everybody, um, but it's not practical either. And I think that there's also, divine timing at play, and yeah, I think you have to have a degree of like I think you have to have a healthy balance of like approaching it with respect, right? Not just like sort of cavalier and childish and like party. Um, so I think having that fear, that reluctance is healthy, but also like a little bit of a you know anticipation of getting rid of those demons. You can
Yeah,
let them out of the closet and let them be gone for good.
right.
Um,
Instead of
yeah.
having to
I,
keep the door
I,
locked.
yeah, I always liken that to just find some place to safely put it down. You can come back and visit it whenever the fuck you want because you know where you set it down.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that brings up another good point too, Sean. Like, there's some risk in this space because and again, it makes me insane. Like literally, like you want to talk about like the war on drugs. here's some counterintuitive thinking, Mr. Politician. How about you give them psilocybin and they'll no longer be drug addicts or alcoholics, you know? And I, if I could, I'd like to just kind of explain the difference in my mind. Actually, it's kind of even in the DEA lingo, but there's a difference between what I call medicine and what, you know, what the world calls drugs, right? There's three criteria. Number one, medicine cures something. Number two, medicine is not addictive. Number three, medicine is not fatal. So all the things that we're talking about, and I know there's some dangers, like I said, about ayahuasca and iboga, but they then of themselves, without being combined with other things, narcotics, they're safe. So all of these things, cannabis, psilocybin, iboga, ayahuasca, acacia, even peyote, wachuma, and even the synthetics, LSD, MDMA, etc. None of those are fatal in any quantity. Any quantity, like, well, I've been told that like a fatal dose of psilocybin is your body weight. So I'd have to sit down and eat 225 pounds of psilocybin in one day. Come on, like seriously? So A, they're not fatal. B, none of them are addictive. In fact, marijuana, cannabis has been shown to be more of an exit drug for people on hard narcotics, where they can transition off using cannabis. And then lastly, yeah, they actually treat something. They've been shown to treat these mental health. So actually, if you want to think of it in that way, like Schedule 1 narcotics, the federal government says that, you know, that those are the three criteria for Schedule 1 narcotic. So psilocybin, for example, is listed as a Schedule 1 narcotic. Whereas I can go, you know, you're all familiar with, you know, the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma and opioids, you know, the Oxycontin that they produced. And yet that's a Schedule 2 narcotic. Yet it's highly addictive, highly fatal, and cures nothing. So when we start getting into this, like, you begin to see the insanity of it all, when in fact the answer to the war on drugs, which, you know, with the opioids and the heroin and all that stuff, would actually be these safer plant alternatives. So yeah, I went off down a rabbit hole there. Sorry about it.
No, I completely follow your line of logic on that. It makes complete sense.
Oh, but I was going to come back to set and setting too. Like the fact that this is black market, but the fact that this is underground, because the federal government won't legalize a plant, it goes into the black market, right? There's a lot of people out there that are serving the medicine in the black, you know, in this space where, you know, like underground, and that's where it does create danger. Anything in the black market comes with an additional set of risks involved, and in plant medicine space, it is the danger of having a, like you said, when you told your friend, well, make sure that, you know, it's a good place, it's safe and setting. So we call that set and setting in this space. So you need to ensure that you got, you know, some good facilitators who know what they're doing, who have an intake form, who put an emphasis on integration post ceremony, where you're working through it in that neuroplastic 30 days. Yeah, like, you know, like we maintain a medic.
It's, you know, a lot of these things are considered revolutionary, right? I mean, you can look throughout history. Some of the best stuff always starts in the underground, you know, because you have a few outside the box thinkers who, you know, experience great success with a few things, and then there you go. Look at the stellate ganglion block. That wasn't a thing until, you know, what, 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that has offered, you know, and again, and that's in a little bit different space, but I think the understanding and the modality of treatment is sort of the same, right? When you use ketamine for things like, you know, dissociative anesthesia, which was intended for in the first place, you know, ketamine's also a bad thing, you know, if it's obtained and used illegally in one of those. And so, you know, can ketamine kill you? You better believe it.
Yeah.
You better believe
Ketamine is one of the ones you need to be very careful with. And again, I have a lot. Again, it's kind of mixed motions. You got to think of it in terms of the Swiss Army knife. Like, I feel like ketamine has a really good place for, it's an immediate stop to your depression and suicidal ideation. In fact, if listeners, so first of all, ketamine clinics are all over this country. If you Google ketamine clinic near me, I'm sure you'll find one. But if you have a friend who is like really seriously thinking about pulling the trigger, like in the immediate future, like get them to a ketamine clinic now, because it will give you that pause. It'll give you a couple weeks to sit and think and come up with a new alternative. So it's really good for that. The one thing that I worry about ketamine clinics is, again, like you said, it's an anesthesia. So does it really solve the problems? Does it let go of the trauma? Not necessarily. And I also feel that these ketamine clinics, a lot of them are a little bit predatory in nature, meaning that they want you to subscribe, basically. Like on your way out, it's like, okay, well, we have an opening 3
5 more
Wednesdays.
sessions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not covered. And like like if you come to do one ayahuasca retreat, by and large, you're going to go home solved, like resolved
Yeah.
and cured.
Not a half-solved Rubik's cube. It's
Mhm.
all sides are done, and I think
Exactly.
that again, here's the conspiracy theory. I don't think they want it cured because there's
No.
just too much. It's like diabetes. I mean, look, a monkey flew a spaceship around the Earth in 1953,
Yep.
right? You can't tell me with all the technology we have today that we can't at least control or cure diabetes. Can't tell me that.
Oh no,
I just don't believe
you
it.
can. Yeah, you can cure it. Yeah. In fact, I don't even believe anymore in incurable disease. Like here's another one. Like that's a great segue into another point that I was hoping that we could talk about.
Oh,
And
excellent.
let's talk about operator syndrome, which like we think that PTSD is kind of like the biggest problem that most of us are facing. It's not. Like actually PTSD is just one of the many dimensions of operator syndrome, where the physical body is broken, the emotional body is broken. We all have like heart conditions. We have, like, if we all lived in the same space, would be a cancer cluster. Like that's operator syndrome. And so like when it comes to cancer, like I don't know how many times, and I'm going to name drop here. I hope that's okay, but last week, my first group sergeant, CSM McFadden,
Yeah.
passed away, and his funeral is in tomorrow. And you know, like he was in his 60s, dude. Like we should not, as a tribe, we should not all be dying of cancer in our 60s. That's fucking insane.
Yep.
Like, unless we were working at a Roundup factory and sampling the product, we shouldn't have this higher rates. But here's another thing for your guests, your viewers to Google. But look up Rick Simpson oil, RSO, in
Black seed.
cancer. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Like there are cannabis is highly concentrated amounts of cannabis THC will go in and attack the cancer cells. And there's people out there treating and curing cancer with Rick Simpson oil. But when I say it in those rooms, nobody asks the question, man. They're like, okay, cuckoo, move on.
RSO and cookies. Go have a good time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played around. It's immensely beneficial.
That's affected me personally. Honestly, look, there's 6 people that I was very close with while I served who are now dead because of cancer. Why is it? And I'm not talking little. I say little cancer like it's a measure, but you're talking multiple myelomas. I mean, heavy hitters. You know what I'm saying? We ate the same dirt. We went to the same places. I have a family history. It's like, when's my time? And if somebody told you, hey, if you start this today, you can prolong your life by 20 years. But before you get a diagnosis, why wouldn't you do that? Because you're afraid? Afraid of what? Dying? you know, it's you're right. It's really insanity that we're not pursuing as many things as we can possibly do to heal ourselves right now.
Yeah, but it's like you said, big pharma.
I think your mic's kind of got a little bit far away.
I lost a little bit of your audio there, Matt.
There, is that okay?
Try it again. Yeah, it sounded like you got a little loose connection there. Nope. Nope.
Not yet.
I have a little trouble hearing you on our end, but all this is a good conversation. Honestly, it's why wouldn't we pursue absolutely as many things as we can? And I think it comes down to stigma, and of course there is legality. There's that kind of thing, but it's time for the laws to change, man. And I think on the political side of town, we have advocates, right? We got outside the box thinkers who are moving into positions now to try to help maybe further some of these causes, but they don't know what they don't know. Either that or they're not willing to take the political risk, to get a solution out there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, like in fact, what's his name from Texas, Congressman Navy SEAL Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, he's actually, I mean, he seems to be taking the risk. He actually wrote a bipartisan bill with AOC, the congressman from New York. So you might see some movement on that, but I really do believe that it's, they want us to be sick so that they can just continue to treat the symptoms.
Manipulate. Yep.
Yep, and keep us, keep us on the, the daily dose, man. Whereas, the thing that drives me crazy about this is like, we should be able to, grow our own medicine. Like, like you live on the farm. Like I have a little vegetable garden. I enjoy growing my own fruits and vegetables out here. Like why, and that's medicine. That's healthy food. Like, right. Like you talk about the outside of the supermarket. Like that's the stuff that's good for my body. Why is somehow psilocybin, which has never had a fatality in recorded history, why is that so scary to you?
Oh, well, it's not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure disease. See,
Right.
It's hard to monetize when you can provide your own solutions.
Exactly, and also when it's one single dose,
Yeah.
Solves the problem. There's not a lot of money in a single dose. Although there are some jackasses out there that are trying to put a patent on psilocybin, which like that shows you the level of greed that exists in our society. When like you want to patent a fungi.
I got some crazy mushrooms growing in my tomatoes right now. I just go check out and see what they are, man.
The other day I had some that popped up in our yard. They always pop up every year. And this year, for the first time, it occurred to me as like, I've just been, again, going along with the narrative that all mushrooms are poisonous and dangerous and I need to, avoid them at all costs. But no, this time I took them out. I studied them. I looked around. I, got on an app or two, double checked, triple checked. And it's like, no, they're actually totally edible. So now I'm like pulling mushrooms out of my lawn and eating them for dinner, man. My wife thinks I'm crazy.
Yeah, that goes back to the SEER school, man, the universal edibility test.
Yeah, I teach the kids that, man. I'm like, this is how you make sure it's not going to kill you.
Yeah. I took a small bite and said, make sure you got Poison Control's number. We'll give it a test shot. We'll see what happens.
We're going for a test drive, honey. Let's see what happens. That's interesting. And I mean, it's almost tongue in cheek to say it, but, look out in your yard, right? Those things that used to be a nuisance like dandelions. Well, now that's, considered one of the best anti-inflammatories, dandelion tea. Have some in, but now it's commercialized, right? I have this solution for free in my yard. I ignored it for many years because I'm like, that's a weed, because that's what I was told, right? Instead, I go spray Roundup on it.
Yeah. We create items to kill that stuff and make sure it never grows back.
Kill it and me and contaminate groundwater at the same time. It just doesn't make a bunch of sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
And I think when you start talking about food products, I don't know if you've ever watched the documentary Food Inc. If you haven't, go have a look at it, because it really talks about, kind of genetically modified plant seeds, et cetera. And growing up, farming with grandpa and whatever, he'd keep back, seed. You can't do that anymore, especially if you're planted beside a crop that is supported by Monsanto, which literally probably 90% of the population has right now. You have to ask yourself, they're controlling the food source. Why? Why is that? You know, when,
Yeah.
when they're now telling you, well, you can't grow that. Well, you can't have chickens. You can't have this. You can't do that.
Can't collect rainwater.
That's a thing. You cannot collect
I
rainwater
know. Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
because it's bad. Why is it bad?
Well, again, it's all, and that I really do think that this is a beautiful part of the discussion, because when you start thinking about that, like, yeah, there is a type of seed. I forget the name of it, where they do regenerate. You have to be, you have to hunt them down. You have to find them where they haven't been,
Heirloom.
genetically. Yeah, thank you. Heirloom seeds, where they will reproduce
Yep.
seed that's viable every year. But by and large, you're right. Most of them aren't anymore, and the rainwater and all that. It is about control, and that's a beautiful segue into really one of the reasons why I think it isn't just monetary, that they want you sick and they want you on their meds.
Mhm.
Like, dude, you're talking about your friend that went, to and did a boga in Mexico. When you do this medicine, like, the chances of having a spiritual awakening are really, really high. Um, and that's not necessarily vital to healing your PTSD. I'm not necessarily, you know,
Sure.
pressing that agenda, but it happens quite frequently. It will with me too. Like, I was very agnostic. I had no relationship with God before I went into this space, but now I feel like I do have a really good relationship with God. Um, but I think that that's a big part of it, where they don't want us to wake up as a society to, all the corruption, the greed, and even in some ways we're all kind of slaves to this system now, where we're dependent. Like a grocery store, if a grocery store wasn't to get, like, if trucking stops, grocery stores can't be refilled, we're all screwed, man. We'll all be dependent on some system and somebody bringing, again, our reinforcements coming.
Mm. No.
That's why I now live on a farm.
Yeah. And so I feel like it's really critical that people, that's another critical aspect of the plant medicine journey, is to have the blinders ripped off, to see what's really going on in this world, to wake up spiritually.
I've got a little book on Indian herbology that I've had for probably 30 years here. And, it's amazing how many times I'll consult that thing. And a lot of them was because they don't have a bunch of, drugs in the cabinet or whatever the case might be. But you would be, again, once again, you'd be surprised what you can find in your front yard, even in the city.
You're right.
And you never, I remember after SEER school going home and walking around in the yard, and I'm like, ooh, that's a maypop. Ooh, I can eat that right there. Ooh, what's that? you know. But until you open your eyes a little bit to some things out there, and guys like Mike Glover, I don't know if you know Mike or not, but Mike is in the take care of yourself and family preparation space, and they've just completely outlawed him. You're a domestic. They labeled him a domestic terrorist. I mean, why? Because he, is about self-reliance and taking care of your family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Radical thinking, man.
Wow.
Yeah. Which one, if we go back to our great grandfather's time, that's all it was, right? Like, it was all self-reliant and before. So yeah, they've enslaved us to the system.
Yeah,
Sadly.
I think self-reliance is one of those things that's bred into all of us, at least a little bit in this community for sure.
For sure.
The ability to survive. That's what, and take care of your family. I think that's what, as men, we want. At least I do for sure. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah,
and and you see that human nature in a time of natural disaster. And a shout out to the guys down in Florida. Please, I hope you're safe and hunkered down. There's a massive hurricane down there, but I think you can watch the rapid degradation of humanity with a lack of resources, and it starts after about 2 days when water it's hard to find.
yeah.
It degrades quickly because people just don't know what to do. Um, some other people do, and they're prepared. They got canned stuff on the shelf, or a food supply or whatever it might be, but
At least a plan.
at least a plan. uh, that's what worries me about living in the city the most, man, is how rapidly things decline in the event of an emergency.
Yeah, I agree.
And can we take care of and treat ourselves? So this has been a phenomenal conversation, Matt. Honestly, I hope the listeners out there take something away from this. If you don't take anything else away, do your research, understand what you're getting into. If you choose a route like this, make sure you find somebody who is professional and understands what they're doing. You can find Matt. I'm not going to list his address; he's out there. But
Yeah.
as this becomes, I think once microdosing psilocybin, at least on a minimum, become more socially accepted to people as a form of not just treatment but curing mental illness. I think there's going to be a huge boom in this, and what I really hope, much like a free base of code out there, that it stays uncommercialized. And I think that's an
Yeah.
impossibility in a capitalistic society, because that's just the way it is. But how do you
I don't know.
how do you feel about keeping that clean?
Oh, I agree with you. I feel like it should be completely uncommercialized. In fact, if you jump on, some social media, I think probably one of the best is Reddit. If you jump into the psilocybin, and there's one called Uncle Ben's. If you jump
Yeah.
into those subreddits, they'll teach you everything you need to know about growing your own psilocybin. Uncle Ben's is the reason
I, I think a
rice
man.
comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already like it's rice that's already been pasteurized. So all you have to do is inoculate it with spore. And again, there you go. There's another example of the absurdity of the law. I don't know if you guys know, but if you go to just about any one of the smoke shops in your neighborhood in the strip mall near you, walk in there and ask them for some psilocybin spore. Pull out a box, generally at least at mine, they'll pull out a box and say, which kind do you want? Um, hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
And so, because you can have it for educational and religious purposes. So they'll sell you the spore. There's nothing illegal about buying spore. And then, you just got to get it to grow. And so there's several techniques. One's called the Uncle Ben's method that'll help you to grow that in your own home. So yeah, I mean, they might, and then some people might just take the easy road and the convenient route, just the same with their food and water and everything else, and outsource that to somebody else. But we've already talked about the dangers of that. Really, truly, like, get into a relationship with your food, get into a relationship with your medicine, and you should be able to grow this stuff in your closet, man.
So is it true? Keep them in the dark and feed them full of shit.
Pretty much.
I'm a mushroom. I've been that way for years.
Yep.
Awesome. So resources to find, go explore on the internet, ladies and gentlemen. Start with the Reddit group, Uncle Ben's, if you want to join up, if you want to know more about it. Go check it out there. Feel free to float us any questions, either here on Twitch, or you can hit us on any of the socials, and we'll direct you to the right path. I'm sure Matt would be happy to entertain questions from the community out there. We can flow them through us if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you send them my way. You can I'll give you my phone number, and you can send people my way.
And so one last topic here. Let's talk about sources of formal education. Is there anything out there, like a base of knowledge? You mentioned the Reddit group earlier. Is there something that is good quality education when it comes to all the different sources of psychedelics?
Oof,
A book, a website?
Trying to think for overall for all of them. Yeah, there's a number of them. Let me do this. Let me go pull up my
Favorites.
favorites. Yeah, man. There's one called TAC, TAC, the Ethnobotanical Database. That's a really good one. Psychonaut Wiki is a great one. That's a really good one. Psychonaut Wiki. Microdosing for Healing is really good. Here's another good one. It's India Charlie Echo Romeo Sierra, ICEERS, Ethnobotanical Education Research and Support. So those are some of my favorites.
Got it. You can hit rewind on this Switch episode as many times as you want and copy those down to go get the links that you need to do your own exploration on this. But as you were doing your research, did you find that people questioned you? Was it like underground research that you had to do on this, or were people open and would talk about it with you?
Yeah, no, like generally speaking, people are really, really open and willing to help and willing to share. I mean, there's several Facebook groups, there's several Twitter, Reddit groups, things like that, where you can get in there and you can ask questions. And people are generally pretty helpful and forthcoming with information. It, I think again, there's, and I don't want to, curse myself or jinx myself, but I really kind of think that law enforcement is to a large degree, to a degree, turning a blind eye to some of this because it's just not, again, it's, there's no harm in it. There's very little risk. There's great reward involved. So yeah, it's, uh, yeah, I'll leave it there. I was going to go on a
It's
tangent.
usually something in addition to doing something else that they're not a fan of, that they will use that as a catalyst to tack on like additional legal challenges for you.
Yeah. Like when you start
Yeah.
talking about mixing, guns,
Yep.
money, and drugs, and that.
Mhm.
But like if you're growing your own mushrooms, like I don't know of anybody that's getting rolled up for growing their own mushrooms. I know that there was one case here locally last year, but the dude had like something crazy like 3 pounds. It's a lot of mushrooms, man.
Yeah.
3 pounds of mushrooms. And he was flashing it on Facebook, and of course the cops came and paid him a visit.
Well, that's that entrepreneurial spirit.
Right?
It's a very well clever way to put that, Sean.
I, I think though it's interesting to study cannabis, right? And you see how many states now are legal for obviously medicinal use, but on top of that, recreational use. And maybe that is a pathway. And the antagonists to this are going to say, "Oh, gateway drug, gateway drug, gateway drug." I get that. Whatever. That's an argument. That's I think the unenlightened argument. But through my own father, who consumed cannabis for his cancer, when nothing else seemed to be working, and he got a lot of relief out of it, and I like to think he got about 3 or 4 extra years of life out of it. Um, I think it's one of those things that people quickly discount. It's radiation therapy, or let me take in some cannabis. Well, let's talk about what radiation therapy does. It kills everything, not just the bad ones, right? Whereas I think the healing properties and anti-inflammatory properties of the different strains of cannabis are again yet unexplored. Or it is what worries me the most is it is well explored and yet not implemented. That's the
Exactly.
part that I really have a problem with. I think that may be the case here too with the psychedelics. I mean, the Army itself did LSD research, early in the '60s
Yeah.
for many reasons, and so maybe it's one of those UFO things we haven't talked about yet.
Well, if you do enough mushrooms, you'll see UFOs. I promise.
Absolutely. And
Um,
hey, no, we can't deny it, right?
right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. I feel like it, it doesn't matter until it does. And what I mean by that is like you can take a position on a certain topic, and then until that topic comes home to you and is on your front door, you
Right.
don't have to deal with it, right? And your position is safe. But the moment it knocks on your front door, i.e., PTSD or something else, then now you got to deal with it. And so, yeah, I got a phone call from an uncle one day, and I was like, oh shit, here we go. A hardcore Mormon uncle is going to read me the riot act on my psychedelic use, and because he was a leader in the church, and you know what he actually said? He said, "Hey, my son is struggling with depression and suicidal ideation. Can you help me get those resources you're talking about?" And so, like you can have that opinion until it comes home to
Yeah.
roost, and then you gotta, you gotta think, well, what do I really want to do? Do I want to keep taking these, poison and not getting anywhere? Just like I was, you're on that wheel, that rat wheel, running the race, and you're like, man, nothing is changing, and you start to look elsewhere.
But isn't it a shame that we're all not so open-minded, right? Until it affects us personally, then we just put the blinders on. We do this, because of what others have told us. So if you get nothing else from this episode, do your own research, do your own exploration, talk to
Johns
people about it.
That's another great research. So let me throw out Johns Hopkins University. Johns
Okay.
Hopkins actually did get permission to study psychedelics. Even though they were illegal, they've been probably studying it for, geez, I don't know, 10, 20 years. And copious amounts of information on psychedelics and especially psilocybin.
So kind of a well-respected scientific body of information there.
Yeah, they're not too shabby.
Yeah, use ChatGPT. I'm sure you can find it.
Yeah, right.
So off subject, we got about 4 more minutes here. Let me get your take on the whole artificial intelligence revolution, because that's something that's interesting to me.
Yeah, great question. I feel like it's intelligence without morality, and I think that that's the problem. I mean, intelligence, wisdom, information is great, and there's plenty of it. There's plenty of people out there in this world who have mass amounts of it, and if they don't have the morals, information is power. So if the person that gains that information and they don't have the morals to accompany it, I think that information could be used to the detriment of society. And I actually feel like we go through these different revolutions in society, right? We had the agricultural revolution, we had the industrial revolution, then we had the information revolution, and those revolutions are getting closer. The span is getting between them is getting narrower and narrower. And I feel like we're on the cusp of the AI revolution, and it scares the hell out of me personally.
What part scares you the most? That the machine is going to learn at a faster rate than we imagine, and it's going to, quote unquote, activate Skynet and take over?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if it's quite that. I don't. It's like everything else. Like I think that even if we look back at the other ones, like if we talk about the Industrial Revolution, I mean that's why we don't grow our own food anymore, right? Because we go and because we're not self-reliant. So with everything that's good, there's usually equal bad in it as well, and you have to sift through it. Same with the internet. The internet's brought so much to us. I just gave you a bunch of great resources to go do your own research on this, but there's a lot of bad on the internet too. And so in that same respect, I look at AI as like, like if I could go back to 1990 and we could talk about how to implement the internet in a safe way that, that didn't provide all the harm that it sometimes causes, then that would have been nice. Hindsight would have been wonderful. So I sometimes wonder what we're going to feel about AI in 20 years, where we're like, ooh, would have been nice to have anticipated that little, landmine.
Hiccup.
Yeah.
And now the question then becomes, who regulates that?
Well,
does it need regulation, or should it have it?
Yeah, I feel like really, and I had a long debate about a friend who she's locked into the mindset that these are drugs and they're bad, and she's like, the government needs to step in and do something, and she's one of the most conservative people I know. And I'm like, did you just hear the words that came out of your mouth? Like, do you really want to outsource anything to the government? And so my belief is kind of like what we're talking with food. Where that lies? That lies in my home and with my family, the responsibility to, with all the stuff, with the food, with the psilocybin, with the internet, and soon to be the AI.
Personal. It's always one of those things, moderation, right?
Right.
Too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
I just don't want to outsource anything to the government, to be honest with you.
100%.
I'd rather just kind of deal with it on the family level, my home.
No, and I think that's probably the solution that all freedom-loving individuals in this United States want. Just leave us alone, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let us grow our plants and use them for medicine and grow our food, and we'll be okay.
And yeah, some fresh veggies and a joint at the end of the evening. Some kombucha in the morning.
Been a great talk. We're top of the hour here, so we're going to close this thing up. Again, thanks, Matt. Much appreciate all the commentary, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing all of your wisdom.
I think Nick's going to take us out here.
That's it. All right, tune in next week. We'll have some more veteran-oriented content.
And
Mark and I have both been in the infantry in the Army. I had been in the Marines prior to that. We both ended up in a unit called 1st Special Forces Group.
I was a sniper in the infantry, been a sniper in Special Forces, and did a full career in different types of teams, mountain team, air ops team, counterterrorism team. I met Curtis actually at Fort Lewis when he was running a sniper locker, and then we were on a team together in Okinawa. We've been friends, and we've always talked about going into business and life after the Army.
We got out, went to work in the civilian world, and realized a lot of what we did in the military translated to business. We looked at the cutlery industry, and the people there, as a culture, were fantastic. And we said, hey, we're going to start a knife company here in North Carolina.
In the beginning, we had a knife grinder, a blaster, some rudimentary tools. We started out and decided, what do we want to make? Well, let's make something we know. So it was a combat knife, and we did 3 models because we figured you got to have more than one when you start out.
You know, you think you know everything about knife because you carried one all your life. But to be quite honest, we were new at it. We didn't know everything, so we took them to a lot of our Special Forces buddies at Fort Bragg. They gave us some advice and allowed us to develop those initial products. Today, we have a whole lot more offerings than we did in those early days. We actually have 3 distinct lines of knives we call gold, silver, and bronze. Gold being the knives we make right here in our shop in North Carolina. The silver line knives are those made for us by our partners up in Olean, New York at K-Bar. And our bronze line are knives we design using US-made steel that are manufactured overseas. A lot of folks think we have a giant manufacturing facility with 100 people. And quite honestly, we have 10 core people that we use to build our knives.
Making a knife isn't as simple as most people think. There are many processes that are involved, so we have checks and balances and continuous quality control throughout the processes. We know that perfection should not get in the way of getting your job done. So while we strive for perfection, we know we'll never achieve it.
I'll never forget the first time we won a Blade Show award because of the rest of the industry, the people who do what we do, saying, hey, you guys have this figured out. We realize quality, it's not just the time we put into making the knives, it's not just the high-end materials or processes or even the money we spend, our raw cost to make those knives. In the end, quality is proven out by the people that hold them and use them, right? If someone's willing to pay for it, and they're willing to carry it, and they're happy to carry it, they might even brag about it. To us, that's the measure of quality. We don't chase trends. We don't put things on knives that don't need to be there. We always joke, and I know this sounds ultra simplistic, sharp, pointy, with a comfortable handle. You do those 3 things, you're probably going to be successful in knife making. And I think if you can take a look at a knife, it's very, very simple, but you can immediately say, I know who designed that, or I know who made it. To me, that's a measure of success. That's what we try to do here at Spartan Blades.
Both Curtis and I care about our country. We fought for it. We took our oath seriously and still do to this day. So since our product goes to end users who use it in the most ultimate fight, we take it seriously, what we make. That when it goes in a box and it gets sent to a customer, that it's ready to go wherever you need to go. And it's going to be there and perform. And that's what we strive for every day.